Hello, welcome to another episode of Learn with Lo. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully everybody had an amazing weekend and is looking forward to a great week. We're off to a rainy start on this Monday morning here in Omaha, where I reside. But hopefully it's nice and sunny where you guys are at, and I'm excited to continue on our conversations that we've been building on over the course of the last month. If you've been hanging out with us, we've been taking a little bit of a swerve into some women's health conversations, really bringing to light a lot of more of the conventional treatment strategies that are available to women. If in my stories today, if you saw me, I was talking about these being helpful strategies, and for some women they are immensely helpful, and so that's why we've been able to kind of take that more nuanced approach to having these conversations. But when I talk about more of the conventional approaches when it comes to women's health and hormones, is usually women going into their primary care physician with period problems, whether that's heavy bleeds, menstrual cramping that's taking them out of quality of life, irregular cycles, right? And immediately are handed things like birth control. Or women that are maybe more in kind of a perimenopausal, menopausal place, they start to go to their primary around things like maybe they're having fibroid issues, or having more heavy bleeding, and they're really just thrown, hey, let's just take it all out. You're done having children. Let's do full hysterectomy route. Or even, that perimenopausal transition or menopausal transition around hot flashes, changes in libido, and we're just hurriedly putting women on hormone replacement therapy, whether it's bioidentical or synthetic, right? And again, as you guys have been following along and kind of recognizing, my stance on these is not to make these things sound bad or awful by any means. It's like these are treatment tools out there, and they're absolutely life-changing for women. This is more me bringing in a different side of the conversation that I don't think is always brought to light in a conventional medicine atmosphere, just because they're not necessarily educated on it, and it's not usually under their scope of practice or under their umbrella. So this is to bring a whole nother side of the conversations, because I want women to feel empowered and educated about how their body works, and to be able to at least be able to say, hey, what are all of my options out here for these struggles and these symptoms that I have? And then once we lay all of the options out on the table, I feel pretty dang confident that most women can argue for themselves or come to a conclusion for themselves of what they feel is the right path forward for them. So I just think that if we don't have this other side of the conversation, when we have women going into conventional care with things, like I said, menstrual cycle irregularities, increase in anxiety, heavy bleeding, fibroid concerns, changes in, like I said, night sweats, libido, hot flashes, migraines, insomnia, heart palpitations, I mean, you name it, all of these hormonal things, we tend to kind of get more of those handouts or kind of that like pill for every ill. And we have to at least recognize that these are some kind of like backhanded ways in which we dismiss or normalize women's health symptoms, right? That's not a really great approach. If you're coming to someone and talking about all their symptoms and like, here you go, here's a pill. Like, it's really kind of a backhanded way of saying like, and what you're experiencing, I hear it all the time, we'll just shut those symptoms up. I'm not going to do the time or the digging to figure out why you're having those symptoms or what those symptoms might be trying to tell us a bigger thing to look at or a bigger conversation to have. We're just going to shut them up, and we're just going to like go in and put a Band-Aid on those, and we'll just deal with problems that come up as out there. I'm not convinced that it is. So I don't want women to ever feel dismissed or normalized by just having more of a Band-Aid solution. I don't want women to be told to shut up their body signals or shut off their body signals, because then that just perpetuates this idea for women that our bodies can't be trusted. And it also perpetuates this idea that we always have to outsource answers outside of ourselves. And we always have to like outsource our healing to someone or something else, right? It's like, oh, well, I have to have the birth control pill. It's like, well, do you? Or are there other options out there that just weren't presented to you? Are there other accesses to healing that you haven't really been told or taught about, right? And I think a lot of times women just want the information, and then they're able to make that decision for themselves. It also breeds, because of this, like when we normalize these symptoms, we kind of put a band-aid on them. We start to perpetuate to women that like, oh, these symptoms that my body is feeling, like I just shut them up. I don't listen to them. I don't dig in farther. I don't ask questions. It's like, of course we do, but it also then really starts to, I guess, kind of prey on this vulnerable population of women, because we start to then think like, oh, well, it must just be all in my head, right? And it starts to then create this cohort where we seek some pretty extreme measures to try to find symptom relief, whether that's fasting, keto, excessive amounts of cardio, taking appetite suppressants. And like, we start to kind of believe that suffering is required to heal. You would be shocked, maybe not shocked, I sometimes am shocked at the amount of women that come into my practice and they seek kind of that like chronic dieting. They're always dieting. They're always trying something. They saw this practitioner and they tried this diet and they tried this supplement and they tried this and tried that. And none of it felt great, but they only go based off of like, well, it worked. I lost 10 pounds. I was like, but did it work? Because you're right back to where you started and then some, and feeling worse. So did that really teach you like how to access your own healing and your own kind of internal pharmacy? Or did you just outsource that to someone or something else? And we created this whole like, my body is unworthy. I'm not worthy of or can't be trusted to listen to what my body is saying. Like, that's the bigger issue. That's the problem. So I don't want anyone to think, like I said, the birth control, the hormone replacement, hysterectomy type conversations, those absolutely have a time and a place in our medicine field. But I more so I think this is not me dogging on those things like you see some functional practitioners doing. I'm like, you do you, boo. Like, if you love that and it's working well for you, amazing, awesome. My stance is more like, but did you know that there's another conversation? Because I at least want you to know that there's another option or another conversation, because you can use both of these simultaneously, and or you could explore a completely different path if you just had that information available to you, right? So that's really just where I wanted to start off and make sure. I know it kind of sounds like a little bit of a soapbox, but it's the bigger picture. It's the bigger conversation behind these things than getting into the nuance and the nitty gritty behind like who's right, who's wrong. It's like, what type of mentality are we feeding to women in their own internal health journey? And are we just perpetuating this like diet culture cycle? I have to get more and more extreme because I'm not getting symptom relief. Nobody's listening to me. I'm just shutting off my body's symptoms. And so then we just like, we get more and more and more extreme. It's like, whoa, stop the crazy train. If you're having to get more and more extreme, there's something that's not right. Something's not working here, right? We shouldn't have to be doing that. So that's where I want to make sure that we understand that there is a whole nother conversation. So that's kind of my jam here. If that's your jam, you're interested in that other side of those conversations, then you are my people. Welcome. So that's where I'm just here to bring education and resources and tools to really help you, like I said, kind of access your own internal pharmacy is what I like to call it. And a lot of times what we've been talking about through the last kind of 3 main learn with lows that I've been doing about hormonal birth control and hormone replacement therapy and things like that, you keep hearing me talk about this estrogen detoxification, right? Or just detoxification and drainage pathways in general as a really big part of this other conversation as far as treatment options available to women that are struggling with menstrual irregularities, heavy bleeding, fibroids, estrogen dominance type symptoms, histamine type reactions, irregular menstrual cycles, migraines, acne, right? All of these things, why people tend to typically reach for those types of pharmaceuticals. It's like there's a whole nother avenue over here that we could really tap into as well too. That's very low risk, high reward, and actually gets to the root of it instead of just covering it up. And then the second that you remove that pill, all of those symptoms come flooding back with vengeance. It's like, did we really do anything? Like, I don't think we really made that individual healthier by any means by just covering up their symptoms. We want to really go at the root because there's probably a bigger picture happening here, right? So When I think about this conversation, I really kind of wanted to wrap us up and kind of take us a different direction here with our topics by really digging into what is this estrogen detoxification conversation? How does our body detox estrogen? How does it want to kind of like use it and lose it? What hormones, what systems are kind of involved in that process, so that you guys can get a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes of some of the conversations that I get to have with one-on-one clients, with some of the women that come to my practice struggling with a lot of these symptoms and not finding the answers in conventional medicine or wanting to kind of hear the other side of this conversation that I've been talking about. So I've gotten a lot of DMs and some questions and comments from people. They're like, what is this estrogen detox? What is this liver conversation that you keep talking about? So that was what today is about. If you've been curious with that, let's dive in. So let's start off by just talking about what is estrogen detoxification. I'll try not to get too sciencey with it because you can Google all of the different estrogen detoxification pathways out the liver, through the colon, all of that great stuff. But our body does detox estrogen very similar to a lot of our other endogenously created hormones, specifically any hormones that cause growth. Right? There's certain hormones, little chemical messengers in our system that travel around and they cause things to grow, right? In a good way, as long as it's controlled. Like even insulin is a growth promoting hormone, right? It causes our fat cells to grow. Even testosterone is a growth promoting hormone. It causes bone and muscle growth, right? Estrogen is a growth promoting hormone because it thickens the lining of the uterus to prepare for things like implantation, right? So estrogen is a growth promoting hormone. It also causes like the growth and development of breast tissue in puberty, in women as well too. So as long as that goes checked, right? We don't want what we call like unbalanced or unchecked estrogen, because then we're going to get too much growth. And that's where we tend to hear about things like cancers, right? Fibroids, fibrocystic breasts, cysts, right? All of those things is like, ooh, that's like unchecked growth. The body wasn't able to like use what it needs and lose it, right? That's where this whole estrogen detoxification conversation comes in. So there's other hormones that are involved here, but we'll kind of focus on more of the estrogen piece just because that's where a lot of times more of the like menstrual cycle symptoms or the symptoms that women are kind of seeking out some of that birth control and hormone replacement therapy tend to go for, right? So when we think about estrogen detoxification, let's keep it super high level. There are 3 phases of estrogen detox. The first 2 happen in the liver and the last one happens out our drainage pathways, right? So phase number 1 of estrogen detox is a process in the liver called hydroxylation. Nothing fancy that you really need to concern yourself about. It takes our body's estrogen. We have multiple different types of estrogen, but it transforms it into either a 2-hydroxy, a 4-hydroxy, or a 16-hydroxy. Each of those having different functions in the body. Ideally, the 2-hydroxy pathway is the dominant one. The 4 and the 16 can have more of those proliferative effects or more of those like inflammatory kind of cancer-causing known effects. So we can actually measure how somebody manages their estrogen detoxification pathways as well too. But we have 3 pathways there of hydroxylation, 2, 4, or 16, right? So that first process happens in the liver. Once we get those estrogen metabolites, then phase 2 is going to be a process called methylation of those metabolites. And there's certain genes involved in methylation. You guys have probably heard of things like the MTHFR gene or maybe COMT or the COMT. Those types of enzymes and genes are involved in our body's methylation capacity. Some people just by genetics are poor methylators. Other people need a little bit of methylation support. Our diet and lifestyle can support methylation strategies through the liver as well too. But essentially what the liver is doing is it's trying to take something like a hormone that is fat soluble and trying to make it water soluble so that we can excrete it out our detox pathways, whether that is urine, bile, poop, things like that, right? The body is trying to package it so we can get it out and not store it as a fat soluble, because that can also cause fat cells to grow. Fat cells and estrogen kind of go hand in hand. So we just don't want this process unchecked, right? It's not a bad thing. It's going to happen. We want a healthy level of this, but you don't want it unchecked because then that's where we tend to get side effects, right? So phase 1 is that hydroxylation. We get pathways 2, 4, or 16. Then we take those pathways and those metabolites and we try to methylate them in a process that also happens in the liver. And then phase 3 is going to be elimination of the estrogen out any of those detox pathways that I talked about last time. A small amount can be sent to the urine. Some of it can also be sent out through the bile and also sent out through the gut or through your daily bowel movements, right? Which is why I talked about in our hormone replacement therapy conversation last week, I talked about how, to me, women that are not pooping every day are not a great candidate for hormone replacement therapy, because to me, it's like, especially that estrogen, testosterone going into the system in a system that's already not pooping every day. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're just throwing some excess hormones into a system that already isn't equipped to get those things out, right? There's some work we got to do first, right? Otherwise, that could probably turn into a situation where we don't have great outcomes from stuff like that, right? So you can kind of see here, you're like, oh, okay, so you're telling me that the liver and the gut are kind of like biggies when it comes to women's health and hormones. Hell to the yes, I'm saying that, and I'm shouting it from the rooftops because I feel like the poor liver doesn't get enough time in the spotlight and doesn't get enough time in the sun. And in our daily diet and lifestyle, we don't tend to love up on our liver very well, and that can contribute to a lot of downstream issues. And then we try to just do more diets. We try to just do more detoxes. We try to just do more cardio. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, you're looking in the completely wrong spot here. We're just trying to, like I said, hyper control it, and we're not allowing the body to really work its magic. So when I think about the gut and the liver here, we want to kind of think about what maybe some signs or symptoms might be that we have some stagnation here, right? Stagnation is really just a term that we use to describe things that aren't moving, right? Our body is very much a system and a metabolism where it wants to use energy, lose it. We have this good transactional relationship with energy flowing in and out of the system. We don't want the system to feel stagnant, right? To where it's like, ooh, I'm stressed. I don't have enough of what I need. I'm going to hold on. I'm going to create a vault situation. That's usually where we tend to have issues with liver and or just proper detoxification patterns as a whole. So some potential signs that this estrogen detoxification pathway for you may be slow or stagnant, or it might need some additional support. We talk about heavy, painful periods are a big one. That is going to be a process or kind of a look of estrogen dominance. So we want to try to balance that back out. So maybe you have really heavy, painful periods. I know it's hard to describe because you only really know your cycle. But if you're someone out there that's feeling like I have to change a super tampon every hour on the hour, or I'm bleeding through tampons and pads, that is a very heavy cycle, right? So definitely knowing heavy, painful cycles, hormonal acne and or histamine issues. Histamine is like hives, itchy skin, breakouts. A lot of women get that around their menstrual cycle as well too. Gallbladder flares, or kind of goes along the same lines as if anyone has ever experienced period poops before. If you know, you know. But gallbladder and even some things called prostaglandins, which are some inflammatory markers, can change bowel patterns throughout the menstrual cycle. That can also be a sign that your estrogen detoxification isn't super great. Chemical sensitivity to smells or environment. This kind of plays around with histamine reactions, but some people know that they're easily influenced by fragrances or certain smells, certain chemicals in the air, or skin. They break out really easily based off of what they put on their skin or detergents that they might use. Again, another sign kind of some liver love might need to happen here. Significant vasomotor symptoms like severe hot flashes, night sweats, even migraines are a vasomotor symptom. So that could be some signs of estrogen dominance as well too. personal or family history of estrogen receptor growths like endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, fibroids in general, all of those can kind of play into that estrogen detoxification pathway, and or any personal or family history of like estrogen receptor based cancers like breast, ovarian, uterine type cancers. All of those types of things, like when I see any of those things on an intake form, I'm immediately starting to think estrogen detox, right? And it's like, yeah, where might we want to support this a little bit better because we have a little bit of some stagnation obviously going on. Let's kind of dig into that, right? So that's where I think my biggest issue kind of comes in, is because when we have these issues and it's like there's obvious some like stagnation in the picture, our first inclination is to put more hormones in the system, like synthetic birth control or hormone replacement therapy. I'm like, ooh, like I don't know, like putting some more hormones into a system that already feels like a vault. I'm like, I don't know, like that just doesn't seem like it's gonna really give us like the best outcomes, right? It might minimize some symptoms temporarily, but sometimes it can also exacerbate symptoms. If nothing else, it definitely doesn't create a long-term solution here. So that's where I really kind of look at things a little bit differently, right? So this is where I just get into this other side of this conversation. Should you be interested in pursuing other avenues of looking at these types of symptoms or health concerns outside of just putting more hormones in the system, right? So when I think about supporting estrogen detoxification, without a doubt, we have to support the gut and the liver. Now, the cool thing about these following things that I'll kind of talk through at a high level is you can do any of these things with or without birth control or with or without hormone replacement therapy. So it doesn't, that's why I say it doesn't have to be this like either or conversation, functional versus traditional medicine. It's like, why don't both of these like work together, right? What are some things that I should be doing while I'm on hormonal birth control or while I'm on hormone replacement therapy to get myself the best outcomes, but also to build like a long-term strategy and not just a symptom management strategy. So always nice to know that it doesn't have to be an either or. You can kind of use both of these, but without supporting some of the estrogen detoxification, you're really not getting to a root cause approach. So just know that in the back of your head. So when it comes to recognizing how are we going to support the gut and the liver to really think about this estrogen detoxification picture, number one, let's really talk about detoxification in general, right? I think we get this connotation around detox that it's like juice cleanses and fasting, and it's really none of those things. Like you would be shocked to learn how many nutrients and resources are involved in your body's adequate detoxification pathways. This is not something where it's like less is more. It's not, that's not like a system clean out or taking a bunch of like laxatives or herbal teas that make me like shit my pants. Like that's not detoxification. Like detoxification is a very energy and nutrient expensive process, which is why when we go on all these random yo-yo diets and appetite suppressants and hardly eating anything, yeah, of course our body squeezes in like a vault because it just doesn't have everything that it needs to properly detox. So we're seeing a lot of people that are great detoxers because they aren't fueling their bodies properly or living in a way that supports detox. So when I talk about detoxification, it requires lots of nutrition, not juice fast. So I'm thinking amino acids from proteins. I'm thinking B vitamins. Specifically, if you're not a great methylator, we might need some like methylated forms of B vitamins. We also need things like magnesium. We can get that through food. We can use things like Epsom salt baths, I think are a great underutilized resource for things like magnesium as well too. So we also need lots of antioxidants. We need lots of flavonoids. We need lots of different nutrients for the liver to really do its magic. So don't think that a detox is like a fast or a juice cleanse or like not eating. If that is the detox that you've been described or like a bunch of laxatives, then that's not really a detox. It's just a really expensive laxative strategy. Probably not going to do what you think it's doing. Just fair word of warning there. And you'll probably actually end up more depleted if you just end up like 3 days of diarrhea. Like you're probably worse off from a detox perspective than you were before. So food for thought. Number two, so number one, detox requires lots of nutrients, right? Number two is going to be detox requires a lot of antioxidants in specific, because that's going to help us fight this inflammation and or free radicals that help, or not that help, free radicals that damage our mitochondria. Mitochondria being the little powerhouses in our cells that are responsible for the energy required for detoxification. There's lots of mitochondrial density in our liver. So we really want to make sure that we're supporting those guys as well too. So when we think antioxidants, think like color diversity, obviously, in our food. We also think like one of our powerful antioxidants being glutathione. So we look at supporting patterns to where glutathione isn't really one that you want to like supplement. It's very expensive to supplement, like a liposomal form of glutathione. Plus it has just like a really short half-life. In fact, you want to just give your body more resources to create its own glutathione, which happens in the liver, right? Imagine that. So supportive foods and supportive precursors for things like that. Another powerful antioxidant in your system is melatonin. Again, not to be taking external melatonin, because then you're going to mess with your body's own natural disruptive production of melatonin, but it just shows you the importance of like deep sleep. Circadian rhythm is going to be huge for supporting your liver and estrogen detoxification, as well as also like not just like ramping up your antioxidant intake, but also looking at things that deplete your antioxidants, usually poor circadian health, poor sleep, and also alcohol. Womp womp. That one just like obliterates your antioxidants for sure. Number three is going to be becoming familiar with your most common and controllable toxin exposures. Not always the most fun conversation to be able to have with people, because we are constantly exposed to toxins. It is what it is, get used to it. But our body needs to absolutely be able to clear those toxins. And people that aren't able to clear those toxins end up with those built up in the system, specifically in the liver, and then that causes issues. So you're not going to be able to control all of them, but I would definitely start to look at trying to eliminate some of your biggest offenders. Air, skin, water tend to be kind of your big three there. I always think about things like phthalates, which are going to be found in anything that's like fragranced, detergents, candles, scents, and stuff like that. I think of endocrine disruptors like your BPA found in like plastics and things like that as well too. Always getting into like pesticides. Those can be endocrine disruptors as well. It gives you a pretty good cause for opening up drainage pathways elsewhere, whether that's like dry brushing, sauna, lymphatic movement, things like that as well too. So we have to open up those other pathways as well. And then number four, which is going to be a surprise to you, we have to be pooping every day. This is huge when it comes to estrogen detoxification. So this might require a little bit of digging though, because when I do work with individuals that have a chronic constipation picture, it's never a one size fits all approach. I tell them that from the jump. I'm like, we're gonna try some of the most common pathways, but I have lots of tools in my toolbox here, so don't get discouraged if the first few don't move the needle for you. But we really need to think about the fact that a lot of estrogen reabsorption happens in the gut. So we could be packaging estrogen really well through the hydroxylation and methylation in the liver, but then if we pass it to the gut but we're constipated, there are certain enzymes and bacteria in the gut that reabsorb estrogen back into circulation. And the liver's like, what the hell? I just did all of that work and you can't poop it out. So that's what we really need to make sure that we're not reabsorbing that estrogen through the gut. So that's where we may need to really be looking at more advanced testing, maybe some stool testing to really be looking at what's your digestive capacity. Are we breaking down those things? Do we have some dysbiosis patterns? Are we reabsorbing estrogen into the system? But we definitely need to be thinking about pooping 1 to 2 times a day. And if you're struggling with navigating hormonal imbalance, or you're thinking about or on hormonal birth control or hormone replacement therapy and you're not pooping every day, I'd make that like, let's move that to like priority number 1, right? It's not always more fiber. For some people, it's less fiber. Some people, it is more fiber. So that's why I say it's not a one size fits all approach, and we might need to dig a little bit deeper in that. And then last but not least, I'll leave you with this one because it has to be said. We have to lower emotional and mental stress. There is nothing that depletes your minerals and your antioxidants more than that. There's nothing that brings your body in like a vault more than physical and emotional and mental stress. So making sure that we also have some grounding strategies, some nervous system regulation tools so that we're not stuck in that fight or flight, but we are also actively pursuing that rest and digest state as well too. So when I think about estrogen detoxification and the whole other side of this conversation that is available to you as an avenue to explore, either in conjunction with or outside of birth control or hormone replacement therapy, the estrogen detoxification is it, right? So gave a very high level overview of that today, but that's obviously because like I am not your practitioner, you are not my client or patient, so it has to stay more high level. But if you're interested in being like, Lauren, this sounds like me, I've been struggling with this, I'm super interested, perfect. Head over to the link in my bio. There's an application process there where you can apply for my one-on-one services, where we can dig into some of these more functional testing. We can get to the root of this and really work in a more one-on-one setting to do that for you, based off of the information that is part of your past, current, and future health history as well too. So hopefully this estrogen detoxification conversation was helpful for you guys. And I look forward to hearing and seeing your guys' feedback on this. And if you have, like I said, more questions, drop them in the comments of this video because I'm sure other people could benefit from it as well too. So dig in and learn about that estrogen detox a little bit more, and we will tune in with you guys next week for another episode of Learn with Lo.